Chapter 15 Nest Building. After another week of rain, the high arc of blue sky appeared again, and the sun which poured down was quite hot, though there had been no chance to see either the secret garden or Dickon. Mistress Mary had enjoyed herself very much. The week had not seemed long. She had spent hours of every day with Colin in his room, talking about Rogers or gardens or Dickon and the cottage on the moor. They had a look at the splendid books and pictures, and sometimes Mary had read things to Colin, and sometimes he had read a little to her. When he was amused and interested, she thought he scarcely looked like an invalid at all, except that his face was so colorless and he was always on the sofa. "You're a silly young one to listen and get out of your bed to go following things up like you did that night," Mrs. Lennox said once. "But there's no saying it's not been a sort of blessing to the lot of us. He's not had a tantrum or a whining fit since you made friends. The nurse was just going to give up the case because she was so sick of him, but she says she doesn't mind staying now you have gone on duty with her," laughing a little. In her talks with Colin, Mary had tried to be very cautious about the secret garden. There were certain things she wanted to find out from him, but she felt that she must find them out without asking him direct questions. In the first place, as she began to like to be with him, she wanted to discover whether he was a kind of boy you could tell a secret to. He was not in the least like Dickon, but he was evidently so pleased with the idea of a garden no one knew anything about that she thought perhaps he could be trusted. But she had not known him long enough to be sure. The second thing she wanted to find out was this: if he could be trusted, if he really could, wouldn't it be possible to take him to the garden without having anyone find it out? The Grand Doctor had said that he must have fresh air, and Colin had said that he would not mind fresh air in a secret garden. Perhaps if he had a great deal of fresh air and knew Dickon and the robin and saw things growing, he might not think so much about dying. Mary had seen herself in the glass sometimes lately, when she had realized that she looked quite a different creature from the child she had seen when she arrived from India. This child looked nicer. Even Martha had seen a change in her. "The air from the moor has done you good already," she had said. "You're not so yellow, and you're not that so cranny. Even the hair doesn't slam down on the head so flat. It's got some life in it, so as it sticks out a bit." "It's like me," said Mary. "It's growing stronger and fatter. I'm sure there's more of it." "It looks it, for sure," said Martha, ruffling it up a little round her face. "You're not half so ugly when it's that the way, and there's a bit of red in the cheeks." If gardens and fresh air had been good for her, perhaps they would be good for Colin. But then if he hated people to look at him, perhaps he would not like to see Dickon. "Why does it make you angry when you're looked at?" she inquired one day. "I always hated it," he answered, "even when I was very little. Then when they took me to the seaside and I used to lie in my carriage, everybody used to stare, and ladies would stop and talk to my nurse, and then they would begin to whisper, and I knew that they were saying I shouldn't live to grow up. Then sometimes the ladies would pat my cheeks and say, 'Poor child.' Once when a lady did that, I screamed out loud and bit her hand. She was so frightened she ran away. She thought you had gone mad like a dog," said Mary. "Not at all," added merrily. "I don't care what she thought," said Colin, frowning. "I wonder why you didn't scream and bite me when I came into her room," said Mary. Then she began to smile slowly. "I thought you were a ghost or a dream," he said. "You can't bite a ghost or a dream, and if you scream, they don't care." "Would you hate it if a boy looked at you?" Mary asked uncertainly. He lay back on his cushion and paused thoughtfully. "There's one boy," he said quite slowly, as if he were thinking over every word. "There's one boy I believe I shouldn't mind. It's that boy who knows where the fox live, Dickon." "I'm sure you wouldn't mind him," said Mary. The birds don't, and other animals, he said, still thinking it over. Perhaps that's why I shouldn't. He's a sort of animal charmer, and I am a boy animal. Then he laughed and she laughed too. In fact, it ended in their both laughing a great deal, and finding the idea of a boy animal hiding in his hole very funny indeed. What Mary felt afterward was that she need not fear about Dickon. On that first morning, when the sky was blue again, Mary wakened very early. The sun was pouring in slanting rays through the blinds, and there was something so joyous in the sight of it that she jumped out of bed and ran to the window. She drew up the blinds and opened the window itself, and a great waft of fresh, scented air blew in upon her. The moor was blue. The whole world looked as if something magic had happened to it. There were tender little floating sounds here and there and everywhere, as if scores of birds were beginning to tune up for a concert. Mary put his hand out of the window and held it in the sun. "It's warm, warm," she said. "It will make the green points push up and up and up, and it will make the bulbs and roots work and struggle with all their might and the earth." She kneeled down and leaned out of the window as far as she could, breathing big breaths and sniffing the air until she laughed because she remembered what Dickon's mother had said about the end of his nose curving like a rabbit's. "It must be very early," she said. "The little clouds are all pink, and I've never seen the sky look like this. No one is up. I don't even hear the stable boys." A sudden thought made her scramble to her feet. "I can't wait. I am going to see the garden." She had learned to dress herself by this time, and she put on her clothes in 5 minutes. She knew a small side door, which she could unbolt herself, and she flew downstairs in her stocking feet and put on her shoes in the hall. She unchained and unbolted and locked, and when the door was open, she ran across the step with one bound, and there she was standing on the grass, which seemed to have turned green, and with the sun pouring down on her and warm sweet wafts about her, and floating and twittering and singing coming from every bush and tree. She clasped her hands for pure joy and looked up in the sky, and it was so blue and pink, and pearly and white and flooded with springtime light, that she felt as if she must flute and sing aloud herself, and knew that thrushes and robins and skylarks could not possibly help it. She ran around the shrubs and passed toward the secret garden. "It is all different already," she said. "The grass is greener, and things are sticking up everywhere, and things are uncurling, and the green buds of leaves are showing. This afternoon, I am sure Dickon will come." The long warm rain had done strange things to the herbaceous beds which bordered the walk by the lower wall. There were things sprouting and pushing out from the roots of a clump of plants, and there were actually here and there glimpses of royal purple and yellow unfurling among the stem of crocuses. 6 months before Mistress Mary would not have seen how the world was waking up, but now she missed nothing. When she had reached the place where the door hid itself and the ivy, she was startled by a curious loud sound. It was a call of a crow, and it came from the top of the wall. And when she looked up, there sat a big, glossy, plumaged blue-black bird, looking down at her very wisely indeed. She had never seen a crow so close before, and he made her a little nervous. But the next moment, he spread his wings and flapped away across the garden. She hoped he was not going to stay inside, and she pushed the door open, wondering if he would. When she got fairly into the garden, she saw that he probably did intend to stay, because he had alighted on a dwarf apple tree, and on the apple tree was lying a little reddish animal with a bushy tail, and both of them were watching the stooping body and the rust-red head of Dickon, who was kneeling on the grass working hard. Mary flew across the grass to him. "Oh, Dickon, Dickon!" she cried out. "How could you get here so early? How could you? The sun has only just got up." He got up himself, laughing and glowing, and tousled his eyes like a bit of the sky. "Ah," he said, "I was up long before him. How could I have stayed abed? The world is all fair began again this morning, it has, and is walking and humming and scrapping and piping and nesting building and brassing out scents, till you've got to be out in it instead, lying on your back." When the sun did jump up, the moor went mad for joy, and I was in the midst of the heather, and I ran like mad myself, shouting and singing, and I came straight here. I couldn't have stayed away. Why, the garden was lying here waiting. Mary put his hand on her chest, panting as if she had been running herself. "Oh, Dickon, Dickon," she said, "I'm so happy I can scarcely breathe." Seeing him talking to a strange, the little bushy-tailed animal rose from its place under the tree and came to him, and the rook, counting once, flew down from its branch and settled quietly on his shoulder. "That's a little fox cub," he said, rubbing the little reddish animal's head. "It's named Captain. And this here Soot he flew across the moor with me, and Captain he ran same as if the hounds had been after him. They both felt the same as I did." Neither of the creatures looked as if he were the least afraid of Mary. When Dickon began to walk about, Soot stayed on his shoulder, and the Captain trotted quietly close to his side. "See here," said Dickon. "See how this has pushed up, and this, and this. And look at this tree. Look at this here." He threw himself upon his knee, and Mary went down beside him. They had come upon a whole clump of crocuses burst into purple and orange and gold. Mary bent her face down and kissed them. "You never kiss a person in that way," she said when she lifted her head. "Flowers are so different." He looked puzzled but smiled. "Ah," he said, "I've kissed Mother many a time that way when I come in from the moor after day roaming, and she stood there at the door in the sun, looking so glad and comfortable." They ran from one part of the garden to another, and found so many wonders that they were obliged to remind themselves that they must whisper or speak low. He showed her swelling leaf buds on rose branches, which had seemed dead. He showed her 10,000 new green points pushing through the mold. They put their eager young noses close to the earth and sniffed its warmed springtime breathing. They dug and pulled and laughed low with rapture until Mistress Mary's hair was as tumbled as Dickon's, and her cheeks were almost as a poppy red as his. There was every joy on earth in the secret garden that morning, and in the midst of them came a delight more delightful than all, because it was more wonderful. Swiftly, something flew across the wall and darted through the trees to a close-grown corner, a little fleur of red-breasted bird with something hanging from his beak. Dickon stood quite still and put his hand on Mary almost as if they had suddenly found themselves laughing in a church. "We must not stir," he whispered in broad Yorkshire. "We must not scarce breath. I knowed he was made hunting when I seed him last. It's been Weatherstaff's robbing. He's building his nest. He will stay here if us don't flight him." They settled down softly upon the grass and sat there without moving. "Us mustn't seem as if us was watching him too close," said Dickon. "He would be out with us for good if he got the notion us was interfering now. He'll be a good bit different till all this is over. He's setting up housekeeping. He'll be shyer and readier to take things ill. He's got no time for visiting and gossiping. Us must keep still a bit and try to look as if us was grass and tree and bushes. Then when he's got used to seeing us, I'll chirp a bit, and he will know us will not be in his way." Mistress Mary was not at all sure that she knew, as Dickon seemed to, how to try to look like grass and trees and bushes, but he had said the queer thing as if it were the simplest and most natural thing in the world, and she felt it must be quite easy to him. And indeed she watched him for a few minutes carefully, wondering if it was possible for him to quietly turn green and put out the branches and leaves, but he only sat wonderfully still, and when he spoke dropped his voice to such a softness that it was curious that she could hear him. But she could. "It's part of the springtime. This nest building is," he said. "I warrant it's been going on in the same way every year since the world was begun. They've got their way of thinking and doing things, and the body had better not meddle. You can lose a friend in springtime easier than any other season if you're too curious. If we talk about him, I can't help looking at him. Mary said as softly as possible. We must talk of something else. There is something I want to tell you. I would like it better if I was talking of something else, said Dickon. What is it? You're gonna tell me? Well, do you know about Colin? She whispered. He turned his head to look at her. What does you know about him? He asked. I've seen him. I've been to talk to him every day this week. He wants me to come. He says I'm making him forget about being ill and dying, answered Mary. Dickon looked actually relieved as soon as the surprise died away from his round face. I'm glad of that, he exclaimed. I'm right down glad. It makes me easier. I know that I must see nothing about him, and I don't like having to hide things. Don't you like hiding the garden? Said Mary. I'll never tell about it, he answered. But I says to Mother, Mother, I says, I got a secret to keep. It's not a bad one. You knows that. It's no worse than hiding where a bird's nest is. You don't mind it, does it? Does you? Mary always wanted to hear about Mother. What did she see? She asked, not at all afraid to hear. Dickon grinned sweet-temperedly. It was just like her, what she said. He answered, she gave my hand a bit of a rub and laughed, and she said, Ah, lad, you can have all the secrets you likes. I've known the 12 years. How did you know about Colin? Asked Mary. Everybody has known about Master Craven. No, there was a little lad as was like to be a cripple, and they knowed Master Craven didn't like him to be talked about. Folks is sorry for Master Craven because Mrs. Craven was such a pretty young lady, and they were so fond of each other. Mrs. Matlock stops in our cottage whenever she goes to Swite, and she doesn't mind talking to Mother before us children, because she knows us had been brought up to be trusty. How did you find out about him? Mother was in fine trouble the last time she came home. She said they had heard him fretting, and that was asking questions, and she didn't know what to say. Mary told him her story about the midnight wuthering of the wind which had wakened her, and about the faint, far-off sounds of the complaining voice which had led her down the dark corridors with her candle, and had ended with her opening of the door of the dimly lighted room with a carving four-posted bed in the corner. When she described the small ivory white face and the strange black rimmed eyes, Dickon shook his head. Them just like his mother's eyes. Only hers was always laughing, they said. He says that Mr. Craven can't bear to see him when he's awake, and it's because his eyes is so like his mother's, and yet looks so different in his miserable bit of a face. Do you think he wants him to die? Whispered Mary. No, but he wishes he would have never been born. Mother, she says that's the worst thing on earth for a child. Dumb as it is not wanted, scarce ever thrives. Master Craven had buy anything as money could buy for the poor lad, but he would like to forget as he's on earth. For one thing, he's afraid he will look at him some day and find has grown the hunchback. Colin's so afraid of it himself that he won't sit up, said Mary. He says he's always thinking that if he should feel a lump coming, he should go crazy and scream himself to death. Ah, he ought not to lie there thinking things like that, said Dickon. No lad could get well at them sort of things. The fox was lying on the grass close by him, looking up to ask for a part now and then, and Dickon bent down and rubbed his neck softly and sat a few minutes in silence. Presently he lifted his head and looked around the garden. When first we got in here, he said, it seemed like everything was grey. Look round now, and tell me if they doesn't see a difference. Mary looked and caught her breath a little. Why, she cried, the green wall is changing. It is as if a grey mist was creeping over it. It's almost like a green gas wheel. Ah, said Dickon, and it will be greener and greener till the grey's all gone. Can you guess what I was thinking? I know it was something nice, said Mary eagerly. I believe it was something about Colin. I was thinking that if he was out here, he wouldn't be watching for lumps to grow on his back. He would be watching for buds to break on the rose bushes, and he would likely be healthier, explained Dickon. I was wondering if I could ever get him in the humor to come out here and lie under the trees in his carriage. I have been wondering that myself. I've thought of it almost every time I've talked to him, said Mary. I've wondered if he could keep a secret, and I have wondered if we could bring him here without anyone seeing us. I thought perhaps you could push his courage. The doctor said he must have fresh air, and if he wants us to take him out, no one dare disobey him. He won't go out for other people, and perhaps they will be glad if he will go out with us. He could order the gardeners to keep away so they won't find out. Dickon was thinking very hard as he scratched the captain's back. It would be good for him, I will warrant, he said. Us would not be thinking he would be never been born. Us would just two children watching a garden grow, and he would be another. 2 lads and a little lass just looking on at the springtime. I warrant it would be better than doctor's stuff. Has been lying in his bed so long, and he'd always been so afraid of his back that it has made him queer, said Mary. He knows a good many things out of books, but he doesn't know anything else. He said he has been too ill to notice things, and he's going out of doors, and hates gardens and gardeners, but he liked to hear about this garden because it is a secret. I dare not tell him much, but he said I wanted to see it. I will have him out here sometimes for sure, said Dickon. I could push his courage well enough. Have you noticed how the robin and his mate has been working while we have been sitting here? Look at him, perched on the branch, wondering where it would be the best to put that twig has got in his beak. He made one of his low whistling calls, and the robin turned his head and looked at him inquiringly, still holding his twig. Dickon spoke to him as Ben Weatherstaff did, but Dickon's tone was one of the friendly advice. Wherever that puts it, he said, it'll be all right. You know how to build the nest before you came out of the egg. Get on with it, lad. Now we've got no time to lose. Oh, I do like to hear you talk to him, Mary said, laughing delightedly. Ben Weatherstaff scolds him and makes fun of him, and he hops about and looks as if he understood every word, and I know he likes it. Ben Weatherstaff says he's so conceited he would rather have stones thrown at him than not be noticed. Dickon laughed too, and went on talking. You know that won't trouble you, he said to the robin. Us is near being wild things ourselves, us is nest building too, bless you. Look out, you doesn't tell on us. And though the robin did not answer because his beak was occupied, Mary knew that when he flew away with his twig to his own corner of the garden, the darkness of his dew-bright eye meant that he would not tell their secret for the world.